What if I told you there's a creature that represents our most primitive fears and doesn't need reasons to hunt us? The xenomorph from Alien isn't just a monster. It's the dark mirror of the human condition itself. Prepare to discover why this creature terrorizes us so viscerally and how it exposes the deepest fragilities of our psyche. What you're about to discover will forever change how you see terror. In 1979, Ridley Scott introduced the world to a creature that completely redefined the concept of terror in cinema. But the xenomorph didn't emerge from nowhere. It was carefully constructed to touch upon humanity's most ancestral fears. From a psychological standpoint, the xenomorph represents what Carl Jung would call the collective shadow, all the repressed and feared aspects of human nature materialized in physical form. Unlike other villains who possess complex motivations or explainable traumas, the xenomorph operates on purely biological logic: survive and reproduce. H.R. Geiger, the artist who created the creature's design, based it on biomechanical forms that blend the organic with the industrial. This fusion isn't accidental. It represents our conflicted relationship with technology and our own animal nature. The creature is simultaneously primitive and evolved, natural and artificial. Psychoanalytically, the xenomorph embodies what Freud described as the unheimlich, the uncanny familiar. Its distorted humanoid form activates our facial and bodily recognition capabilities, but in a disturbing way. It's human enough to be recognizable, but too alien to be comfortable. The creature also represents the primordial fear of predation. Studies in neuropsychology show that we have specific neural circuits for detecting predators, developed over millions of years of evolution. The xenomorph activates all these alarms simultaneously. It's fast, silent, unpredictable, and lethal. But there was something no one saw coming. This creature wasn't just any common predator. The moment of rupture happens the instant we realize the xenomorph doesn't follow the natural rules we know. It doesn't hunt from hunger, doesn't attack for territory, doesn't act from protective instinct. Its existence revolves around a single purpose: perpetuating its species through the invasion of other organisms. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, this represents our deepest terror: losing control over our own body. The xenomorph's reproductive process, implanting embryos that grow inside the host, is a fundamental violation of bodily integrity. It's the fear of pregnancy transformed into nightmare, motherhood as a destructive process. Psychologist Dr. Carol Clover identified that the xenomorph represents the grotesque body, an entity that confuses the boundaries between interior and exterior, self and other. When the face hunter attaches to the victim's face, it doesn't just dominate them physically, but psychologically. The victim loses control not just of their body, but of their very identity. Neuroscientifically, the mere sight of the creature activates our amygdala, the brain's fear center, intensely. But even more disturbing is that it also activates areas related to disgust and revulsion, creating a complex and traumatic emotional response. The psychological trauma caused by encountering the xenomorph isn't limited to the moment of attack. PTSD studies show that experiences of total helplessness and loss of control can leave permanent marks on the psyche. The creature represents the impossibility of negotiation, understanding, or escape. It's the materialization of absolute despair. And that's where everything began to crumble, because we realized that against this force, human reason is completely useless. The xenomorph's distorted mind begins to reveal itself when we understand it's not just a predator, it's a perfect survival system. Every aspect of its anatomy and behavior has been shaped to be the supreme hunter, and this forces us to confront a disturbing truth: evolution has no morals. Behaviorists like B.F. Skinner demonstrated that behaviors are shaped by consequences. The xenomorph is the final product of this process taken to the extreme, an organism where every reflex, every movement, Every choice has been optimized for predation. There's no room for compassion, hesitation, or regret in its biological programming. The social structure of xenomorphs, revealed in later films, shows a hierarchy based purely on reproductive efficiency. The queen is the center of a colonial system that prioritizes species perpetuation above any individual consideration. It's a society without ego, without internal conflicts, without doubts, everything humanity struggles to overcome. From a comparative psychology perspective, this represents what would happen if we removed all the elements we consider human: empathy, morality, art, love. The xenomorph is life reduced to its most basic essence: consume, grow, reproduce. It's simultaneously fascinating and terrifying because it represents a more pure form of existence than ours. The creature also functions as a dark mirror of corporate society. Just like the corporations in the films, the xenomorph operates with relentless efficiency, without ethical considerations. Both see other living beings as resources to be exploited. The difference is that the xenomorph is honest about its intentions. Research in ethology shows that perfect predators tend to be solitary and territorial. But the xenomorph breaks these rules. It's both a supreme predator and a highly organized social being. This biological contradiction makes it even more disturbing to our natural understanding. But the true monster was still dormant, because the real terror doesn't come from what the xenomorph does, but from what it represents. The moment of total transgression happens when we realize the xenomorph isn't the true villain of the story. We are. The creature simply exists. We're the ones who create the conditions for our own terror. It follows its biological programming perfectly, while we constantly betray our own moral values in the name of survival. Philosophically, the xenomorph represents what Nietzsche called beyond good and evil, a force that exists outside our moral categories. It doesn't choose to be a predator. It simply is. This amoral naturalness forces us to question whether our concepts of right and wrong are merely artificial constructions that console us in the face of an indifferent universe. Evolutionary psychology suggests that our moral codes evolved to facilitate cooperation in groups. But faced with the xenomorph, these codes become useless. The creature cannot be convinced, corrupted, or intimidated. It exposes the fragility of our civilization built on social agreements that can be broken in moments of extreme stress. Studies on behavior in emergency situations show that ordinary people can commit terrible acts when confronted with existential threats. The xenomorph doesn't just hunt us physically, it hunts our humanity, forcing us to choose between our moral values and our survival. The creature's true perversity lies in its honesty. It never lies, never deceives, never pretends to be something it's not. In contrast, the humans in the films constantly lie to each other, betray each other, sacrifice innocence for personal gain. Who is really the monster? Existential psychology tells us that authentic terror arises when we confront the possibility of our own non-existence. But the xenomorph goes further. It forces us to confront the possibility that our moral existence is also illusory. That we're just another predator, just more sophisticated in our rationalizations. What if it's right? What if all our emotional and moral complexity is just an elaborate form of denial of our basic animal nature? Scientific analysis of the xenomorph reveals a disturbing truth. From a biological standpoint, it represents the perfect organism. Every aspect of its anatomy demonstrates evolutionary principles taken to absolute perfection. It's not madness, it's pure biological logic. Studies in biomechanics show that the xenomorph's body structure optimizes strength, speed, and endurance simultaneously. Its exoskeleton provides protection while maintaining flexibility. Its tail functions as weapon, tool, and sensory organ. Its double jaw allows both grasping and penetrating. It's evolutionary engineering without compromise. The creature's neurobiology, though speculative, suggests a highly efficient nervous system. Without the emotional complexities that characterize higher mammals, all neural processing can be dedicated to survival. It's the brain as a pure predation machine, without the bugs of consciousness, doubt, or remorse. Psychologically, this confronts us with a fundamental question. Is our emotional complexity an evolutionary advantage or an obstacle? Comparative studies between species show that animals with simpler neural systems are often more efficient in their specializations. The human capacity for anguish, depression, anxiety, all these aspects we consider fundamental to our experience, would be considered design flaws from a purely evolutionary standpoint. The xenomorph's parasitic reproduction, though disturbing, is extremely common in nature. Parasitoid wasps, for example, follow similar reproductive strategies. The difference is that the xenomorph applies this strategy to intelligent hosts, forcing us to confront our own biological vulnerability. Theoretical geneticists suggest that a species like the xenomorph could, theoretically, exist. Its ability to incorporate genetic material from other species shown in later films represents an extreme form of horizontal gene transfer, common in bacteria and viruses. The creature's adaptive perfection also explains why it's psychologically so impactful. Our evolved instincts for detecting predators recognizing it the ultimate predator, one against which no natural defense would be sufficient. That's why it activates all our fear responses simultaneously. It wasn't madness. It was cold and perfect evolutionary calculation. The xenomorph's legacy transcends horror cinema. It has become a cultural archetype that has shaped our modern understanding of predation, survival, and the limits of the human condition. More than 4 decades after its creation, the creature continues to influence not just entertainment, but also serious scientific and philosophical discussions. In fields like astrobiology, scientists like Dr. Paul Davies use the concept of xenomorph life to discuss how real alien life forms could fundamentally differ from everything we know. The xenomorph serves as an extreme model of what happens when we remove all moral and social limitations from evolution. Psychotherapists report that patients frequently use the xenomorph metaphor to describe traumas that seem to grow inside them, from post-traumatic stress disorder to destructive addictions. The creature provides a visual language for psychological experiences that are difficult to articulate verbally. In contemporary philosophy, theorists like Graham Harman use the xenomorph to illustrate concepts about speculative realism, the idea that there are forms of being that completely escape human understanding. The creature represents the radical other, that which cannot be domesticated by reason or culture. Sociologically, the xenomorph has influenced discussions about bioethics, especially in areas like genetic engineering and artificial intelligence. It serves as a warning about what happens when we prioritize pure efficiency over ethical considerations. It's a reminder that not all evolution is necessarily progress from a human standpoint. The creature's lasting psychological impact reveals something deep about our nature. We are the only known species capable of imagining our own extinction and being fascinated by that possibility. The xenomorph feeds this morbid fascination because it represents extinction with purpose, not as cosmic accident, but as natural biological process. Paradoxically, our capacity to have nightmares about creatures like the xenomorph may be our greatest evolutionary advantage. By imagining extreme threats, we develop anticipatory survival strategies. The terror we feel is, ultimately, an investment in our own continuity. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the xenomorph's legacy is that it forces us to question whether we're really as different from it as we'd like to believe. The xenomorph isn't just a monster. It's a mirror that reflects our own predatory nature disguised as civilization. It terrorizes us because we recognize in it what we could become if we completely abandoned our humanity. In the end, The most disturbing question isn't whether we can survive the xenomorph, but whether we deserve to survive ourselves. The true alien may be closer than we imagine.